Hello, John Stacy here, coming from my still unfinished studio. I'll finish it eventually. So, the thing I want to talk about today is a practice technique that I use, and also I get my students to use, and random people on the internet who ask me for help. I get everybody to use it. I think it's a wonderful technique. There's a concept I call compression, which is basically any time that you have two extremes, you compress them to something that's very, very manageable. And to give an example, let's say that you had to do a really wide interval slur, something like, E to G, something bigger than an octave. So how do you practice that? The idea of compression is that you take that and you compress it down to something you can easily do. So it's an E to a G with a lot of space between. So let's start by making it much narrower. Let's make it E to G like this E to G. So that's, very, very manageable. A lot of players can easily do that. So once you compress it, you then decompress it. And so I would practice that slur over and over until I get it sounding the way I want. So then after that sounds the way I want it, then you do a half step wider. And so E to G sharp. And the idea here is that you're getting every interval to sound the way you want it to sound when it's fully decompressed. So if you want it to be a very quick trumpet-like slur, ba, it just snaps, then you practice it that way. If you want it to be very glorious, oh, very singing, then you practice it that way. But the idea is that you're trying to get yourself to hear what the interval should sound like whenever you don't have any technical hurdles in the way, and then you start expanding it back up where it should be. So then you would go up to the A, etc., and then B flat. And then you just do this and expand it outward. And you don't expand it until you get the slur compressed, sounding the way you want it to sound. So you do that over and over. And eventually you've reached where it needs to go. I just kind of, I compressed the time that I practiced it. But anyways, so that's, one way to do that. The short that I posted yesterday, the Tchaikovsky 5 solo, somebody actually asked me how I get the E to F sharp to sound good, for reference, talking about that one right there. You can actually do that the exact same way, except you can't compress it all the way down. If you were to invert it, you'd go up. So that's, if you'd compress it, it'd be going a different direction, which you can do that as a way to hear it. That can help you hear it, because da 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 da. I can't really make myself do that. I can make a video on how to do that. I don't really use that. But anyways, so E to F sharp, you'd practice it the same way I mentioned earlier. You'd go E, you'd go down a half step. Get that sounding the way you want it to sound. If you want it to be snapped, you can make it sound that way. If you want it to be singing, you can make it sound that way. But you do E down a half step, and then E down a whole step, down a third, F sharp. So then once you get it there, you practice it over and over and over again until you know what that feels like. And you start to associate the idea that E down to F sharp feels like that. That move of a seventh feels like that. And once you get the feel, then you'll start to notice that it'll work better in other places. Because like in the very next measure, after that E to F sharp, it's another seventh. So it's you don't have to practice it over again. Because if you get that feeling of a seventh going really good, then it's close enough that it should just carry over. So, you can practice this any intervals. There's that one rip that I see written over and over. Starts on a G and it goes up to a G with the staff. And it's like, that's kind of dumb whenever you think about it, but theoretically you could compress that to but that becomes ridiculous. At that point you just kind of make it happen. There comes a point whenever you get good at octaves, that stuff bigger than an octave just kind of happens. So anyways, that's compressing intervals, and that's a practice technique that can help you cover wide interval slurs. Same thing works articulated. Articulated is just slurring without the sonic connection. The air is still connected, the thought's still connected. It just doesn't sound like, it's gooey. Those are still connected with the air and with the thought, So like, that's the exact same thing, just now it's tongued. It's different. So yeah. So anyways, I hope this is helpful for you. And I may post more practice tips later, things I picked up over my career. But anyways, have a wonderful evening.